I stood there, humiliated, in front of hundreds of employees, as my boss fired me for incompetence. But when he opened that sealed envelope I'd been carrying for 15 years, his face went white, because inside was proof that this single mom he just destroyed actually owned half his empire. Before we dive into this incredible story of karma and justice, smash that like button if you believe good things happen to good people, and subscribe for more amazing real-life stories. My name is Sophia Chen, and 7 months ago, I thought my life was over. I was a single mother, working as a senior accountant at Sterling Industries, one of the biggest tech companies in the country. Every morning, I'd drop my 8-year-old son Jake at school, then rush to my cramped cubicle, where I'd spend the next 12 hours crunching numbers for a billionaire who didn't even know my name. Vincent Sterling was everything you'd expect from a tech mogul: arrogant, ruthless, and completely disconnected from the people who actually made his company run. I'd been working there for 7 years, ever since my husband David died in military service overseas. The job barely paid enough to cover rent and Jake's expenses, but it was stable, and stability was all I could hope for, as a widow trying to raise a child alone. What kept me going was this promise I'd made to David before he passed away. He'd given me a sealed envelope, thick, official-looking, with my name written in his careful handwriting. "Sophia," he'd said, his voice weak but urgent, "promise me you'll only open this if you lose everything. If there's ever a moment when you and Jake have nothing left, that's when you open it, not before." I'd promised, even though I didn't understand why he was being so mysterious. That envelope had been sitting in my bedroom drawer for 7 years, collecting dust while I struggled to make ends meet. Life wasn't easy, but we were managing. Jake was doing well in school. I had my best friend Elena working alongside me in the accounting department. And even though money was tight, we had a roof over our heads. I thought that was enough. I thought I could keep going like this forever, just keeping my head down, doing my job, staying invisible. Then came that Tuesday morning in March that changed everything. Vincent Sterling called an emergency company-wide meeting. All 400 employees crammed into the main conference hall, whispers bouncing off the walls about layoffs and budget cuts. I sat in the back with Elena, my stomach churning with anxiety. These kinds of meetings never meant good news for people like us. Vincent strutted onto the stage in his $5,000 suit, looking like he owned the world, which honestly he pretty much did. He started talking about efficiency improvements and strategic restructuring, corporate speak that made my blood run cold. Then he did something I never expected. He started calling out individual employees by name. "We've discovered some serious discrepancies in our quarterly financial reports," he announced, his voice echoing through the silent auditorium. "Errors that could have cost this company millions of dollars." My heart started pounding. I worked on those reports. These mistakes show a level of incompetence that we simply cannot tolerate at Sterling Industries. Then he said my name. "Sophia Chen, please stand up." The words hit me like a physical blow. 400 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me as I slowly rose from my seat, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. Elena grabbed my hand, her face pale with shock. "Mrs. Chen has been responsible for several critical accounting errors over the past quarter," Vincent continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "Her negligence and complete lack of attention to detail have put our entire financial stability at risk. This is exactly the kind of dead weight we need to cut from this organization." I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd been working with the same procedures for 7 years without a single complaint, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The humiliation was suffocating. These were my colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, and now they were watching me get destroyed in the most public way possible. "Effective immediately, Sophia Chen is terminated from Sterling Industries," Vincent declared. "Security will escort her out. Let this be a lesson to everyone here about the consequences of incompetence." The security guards appeared at my side before I could even process what was happening. My mind was reeling, trying to understand how this could be real. 7 years of dedicated service, of working overtime without complaint, of being there every single day. And this is how it ended, with public humiliation and accusations of incompetence. As they walked me out through the lobby, past the receptionist who wouldn't meet my eyes, past the coworkers who stared at the floor, I felt something break inside me. This wasn't just about losing a job. This was about losing everything I'd worked for, everything that kept Jake and me afloat. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Then I remembered I had to pick up Jake early from school. How was I going to explain this to my 8-year-old son? How was I going to tell him that mommy lost her job and we might lose our home? Jake knew something was wrong the moment he saw me. Kids have this way of reading their parents that adults lose somewhere along the way. "Mommy, why are you sad?" he asked as we drove home in silence. "I had a bad day at work, sweetheart," I managed to say. "But we're going to be okay." The words felt like lies in my mouth. That night, after Jake went to bed, Elena came over with ice cream and tissues. She was furious about what had happened, more angry than I'd ever seen her. "Sophia, this is insane," she said, pacing around my tiny living room. "You're the most careful accountant in that entire department. Those reports were perfect. I checked them myself. Something's not right about this." "It doesn't matter," I said, staring at the ceiling. "He's Vincent Sterling. He owns everything. Who's going to believe me over him?" "You can't just give up," Elena insisted. "You have to fight this. You have to—" She stopped mid-sentence, staring at me with this strange expression. "Sophia, didn't David leave you something? Some kind of insurance or savings?" That's when I remembered the envelope. I'd been so focused on just surviving day to day that I'd almost forgotten about David's mysterious last gift. But Elena was right. If there was ever a time when Jake and I had nothing left, this was it. We were about to lose everything. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the drawer where I'd kept that envelope for 7 years. It felt heavier than I remembered, thick with whatever secrets David had left for me. My hands were shaking as I broke the seal and pulled out the contents. What I found changed everything. There were legal documents, stock certificates, bank statements, and a letter in David's handwriting. As I read through everything, my world turned upside down. David hadn't just been a soldier. Before he enlisted, he'd been Vincent Sterling's business partner. 15 years ago, when Vincent was just another ambitious college dropout with a big idea and no money, David had believed in him. David had invested his entire inheritance, $2.3 million from his grandfather's estate, to help Vincent start Sterling Industries. In return, he'd received a 50% partnership stake in the company. The letter David left me explained everything. He'd trusted Vincent completely, so when Vincent suggested that David's name be kept off the public records for security reasons while David was deployed overseas, he'd agreed. Vincent had promised to protect David's interests and ensure his family would always be taken care of. But then David got sick during his final deployment. Cancer, aggressive and fast-moving. He was gone within 6 months of his diagnosis, and in his final weeks, he was too weak to handle business affairs. Vincent had visited him once in the hospital, David wrote, and had assured him that everything would be taken care of, that Sophia and Jake would never want for anything. That was 7 years ago. 7 years of me struggling to pay rent while Vincent Sterling lived in mansions. 7 years of working for poverty wages while he made billions off the company my husband had helped create. The most shocking part was the final document in the envelope, a copy of David's will, properly filed and legally binding, leaving his entire 50% stake in Sterling Industries to me and Jake. Elena read over my shoulder, her mouth falling open. "Sophia, do you realize what this means? You don't just work for Sterling Industries. You own half of it." I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with possibilities, with anger, with this strange mix of grief and hope I'd never felt before. David had known. Somehow he'd suspected that Vincent might try to cheat us. and he'd protected us the only way he could. The next morning, I called the military legal office that had handled David's affairs. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the lawyer who'd processed his will, was still there and remembered the case immediately. "Mrs. Chen," she said when I explained the situation, "I've been wondering about you for years. Your husband was very specific about ensuring those documents were properly filed and legally bulletproof. He seemed to think there might be problems down the line." Within a week, Colonel Hayes had authenticated every document, verified every signature, and confirmed what I could barely believe. It was all legitimate. David's investment, the partnership agreement, the will transferring everything to me. All of it legal, all of it binding, all of it giving me ownership of exactly half of Vincent Sterling's empire. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. As Colonel Hayes dug deeper into the legal history, she discovered something that made my blood run cold. Vincent hadn't just ignored David's partnership, he'd actively worked to erase it. After David died, Vincent had filed paperwork claiming that David's shares had been abandoned and should revert to him as the surviving partner. He'd essentially stolen half the company, betting that David's widow would never know what she was entitled to. Even worse, Colonel Hayes found evidence that Vincent had been monitoring me all these years. He'd known exactly who I was when he hired me, and he deliberately kept me in a low-paying position to prevent me from getting suspicious about my finances. The accounting errors he'd accused me of, they were fabricated. He'd fired me because he was starting to worry that I might figure out the truth. "Mrs. Chen," Colonel Hayes said during our final meeting, "this man didn't just steal from you. He's been actively working to keep you poor and powerless. It's time to take back what's rightfully yours." 2 weeks after being publicly humiliated and fired, I walked back into Sterling Industries. But this time, I wasn't alone. Colonel Hayes was with me, along with 2 other military lawyers, and a briefcase full of legal documents. This time, I wasn't sneaking in through the back entrance. I walked straight through the front lobby to the executive elevator. Vincent Sterling was in his corner office, probably planning his next corporate takeover, when his secretary announced that he had visitors. The look on his face when he saw me was priceless. Confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like fear. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, not even addressing me directly. I thought I made it clear that Mrs. Chen was terminated. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, her military bearing making her presence impossible to ignore. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Colonel Patricia Hayes, and I represent the estate of David Chen. We're here to discuss your illegal appropriation of his partnership stake in this company." The color drained from Vincent's face so fast I thought he might faint. For 15 years, he'd been confident that his secret was safe, that David's widow would never discover the truth. But here I was, standing in his office with legal proof that half of everything he'd built belonged to me. What happened next was the most satisfying moment of my entire life. Vincent tried to bluff, claiming he'd never heard of David Chen, that there must be some mistake. But when Colonel Hayes spread those documents across his mahogany desk, the partnership agreement, the investment records, the properly filed will, his lies crumbled. "This is impossible," he stammered. "Even if this David Chen was a partner 15 years ago, which I'm not admitting, the statute of limitations would have expired by now." "Actually, Mr. Sterling," Colonel Hayes said with a smile that could cut glass, "when you filed those false abandonment claims after Mr. Chen's death, you reset the legal clock. You've been actively committing fraud for 7 years. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing criminal activity." That's when Vincent realized he wasn't just losing half his company. He was potentially facing federal fraud charges. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming, not even me. As the lawyers were going through Vincent's financial records to determine the exact value of my inherited stake, they discovered something extraordinary. Sterling Industries hadn't just grown over the past 15 years, it had exploded. What started as David's $2.3 million investment was now worth over $8 billion. Vincent Sterling wasn't just a millionaire, he was a billionaire, and half of that belonged to me. The media attention was insane. Single mother discovers she owns half of tech empire was the headline in every business magazine in the country. Vincent tried to fight it in court, hiring the most expensive lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Within 3 months, the courts had ruled in my favor. Vincent Sterling was forced to resign as CEO. The board of directors, faced with the reality of the situation, offered me his position. I accepted. My first act as the new CEO of Sterling Industries was to call an all-company meeting, the same auditorium where Vincent had humiliated me just months before. This time, I was the one standing on the stage, looking out at 400 employees who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. 3 months ago, I began. I was fired from this company for allegedly being incompetent. Today, I'm here to tell you that Sterling Industries is under new management. We're going to do things differently now. I implemented immediate changes, fair wages for all employees, paid family leave, health care benefits that actually covered people's needs, and a profit-sharing program that ensured everyone benefited when the company succeeded. The productivity and morale improvements were immediate and dramatic. Elena was promoted to Chief Financial Officer. Jake finally understood why his daddy's picture had such a place of honor in our home. And now in my office, Vincent Sterling. He took a settlement that left him comfortable, but nowhere near the billionaire status he'd enjoyed while stealing from my family. But the most important change was personal. For the first time since David died, Jake and I weren't just surviving. We were thriving. We moved into a beautiful home with a yard where Jake could play safely. He started taking piano lessons, something we'd never been able to afford before. I was able to create a college fund that would ensure he could pursue any dream he had. 6 months later, I received a letter that brought everything full circle. It was from one of David's old military buddies who'd heard about the story in the news. He told me something that Colonel Hayes had discovered in her research but hadn't wanted to burden me with during the legal proceedings. David had suspected Vincent might try to cheat us, but there was more to it. During his final weeks in the hospital, Vincent had visited him just once. David, weak and medicated, but still sharp, had tried to discuss the business and ensure his family would be protected. Vincent had brushed off his concerns, essentially telling David not to worry about business matters and to focus on getting better. David's buddy told me that David had called him after that visit, devastated. He'd realized that Vincent had no intention of honoring their partnership, that his friend had already written him off. That's when David made the decision to prepare that envelope, knowing it might be the only way to protect Jake and me. The envelope wasn't just about money or legal documents. It was David's final act of love, his way of making sure that even after he was gone, he could still take care of his family. He'd outsmarted Vincent Sterling from beyond the grave. Today, Sterling Industries is more successful than ever. We've expanded into new markets, developed innovative products, and created a workplace culture that other companies try to emulate. Jake is thriving in his new school, surrounded by opportunities I never could have provided before. And every morning when I walk into the office that used to be Vincent's, I see David's picture on my desk and remember that love and integrity will always triumph over greed and deception. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about destroying Vincent's life. The answer is no. Vincent Sterling destroyed his own life the moment he decided to steal from a dying soldier's family. All I did was ensure that justice was finally served. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Vincent spent 15 years thinking he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. But karma has a long memory. In the end, his greed and arrogance became his downfall. The single mother he tried to humiliate and destroy became the person who brought him to justice. David always told me that good things happen to good people, even when it doesn't seem like it at the time. He was right. Sometimes it just takes a little longer than we'd like. But justice always finds a way. If this story of karma and justice gave you chills, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that good people do win in the end. What would you have done in Sophia's situation? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out our other incredible true stories about ordinary people who discovered extraordinary things about their lives.